off the internet. So if you're ready to go down one last rabbit hole, this might be the last time we do this together, at least for now. Buckle up, let's dive deep. So I'm going to show you why we are on the brink of a civilization collapse. I think we are at the exact same stages of Weimar Germany, right before their economic collapse, which means that when God's chosen people drive a nation to moral bankruptcy, that is the exact point that they begin to collapse the currency. And they take these countries from a first world country to a third world country pretty much overnight. Corruption, crime, degeneracy, LGBTQ filth everywhere, gay pride everywhere, LGBTQ surgery clinics, political corruption running rampant, oligarchy corruption remains unchecked. These are all the key stages that you are at the very, very end of an empire. So this is what God's chosen people do. Once they turn your country into Sodom and Gomorrah, they collapse the currency. And I think that's the exact point that we are at right now. So if you allow me 5 to 10 minutes of your time, I'm going to show you exactly why you have absolutely no choice but to be behind Bitcoin. And if you think this is a video to shill Bitcoin and you're going to come in the comments talking shit about that, when I'm right about this and your family loses everything, or you're going to be part of the greatest wealth shift in the history of the world and you're going to come out on this atop. It's only going to be one of two options. So if you'll allow me about 10 to 15 minutes of your time, buckle up. We're about to dive deep. Now, in order to break this down, we're going to go over and we're going to check out a thread by my man, Ian Malcolm. Ian Malcolm is exclusively only on X. And I tell you, there's a vast majority of everything that I've learned from a few people. Ian Malcolm is one of them. Ian Malcolm and Truth Teller, Sam Parker, these guys are absolute legends. They're definitely accounts that you have to follow if you're going down these rabbit holes. So let's kick things off with Ian Malcolm's. He goes by @IanMalcolm84 over on X. He says, thread number 1, you live in Weimar 2.0. Almost a century ago, post-World War I, Germany was in rubble. Its people and its culture were impoverished and humiliated. Its infrastructure and economy was destroyed by a corrupt minority group, which monopolized their banking, politics, and media. Sound familiar? Check this out.
Unemployment, hunger, and a hopeless future distinguished the Weimar Republic to the German people. Suicide rates were high. Unemployment topped 30% as desperate Germans committed suicide. Birth rates were extremely low. Anarchy and chaos was in the air. There was nothing the disarmed, humiliated, and hungry German people could do about it, as communists even seized parts of many cities.
Pretty bizarre how many correlations there are between what was happening in Germany in the 1930s, early 1930s, before Mr. H came to power, and exactly what the United States is experiencing today. But it gets worse. So in the last year, Trump has devalued the dollar by 20%. So Ian Malcolm says on thread 2, inflation. In the wake of World War I, endless reparations and hyperinflation hamstrung Germany's economy, impoverishing its once prosperous people. Churchill expressly stated that Germany would weather for decades. The result was the worthless currency referred to as Jewish confetti. Check this out.
Ben Bernanke said, regarding the Great Depression, we did it.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally. And we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency and we distribute that to the Federal Reserve banks.
By we, Bernanke of course meant the Jewish leaders of the Federal Reserve System. Back in Germany, the effects of the engineered stock market crash was even worse than in any other country, as the life savings of the people were wiped out as prices doubled every 2 days for 20 straight months.
Inflation was spiraling wildly out of control. People would be paid in the morning and have suitcasefuls of banknotes, and they would have to then run to the shops because in the time between being paid and the time when they bought their goods, their food, the prices would have risen.
And that's exactly why Hitler came to power in 1933. By 1938, he was Time Magazine Man of the Year. Man of the Year because of his economic miracle, they called it. They couldn't wrap their heads around how it was possible that without a Federal Reserve, without usury, had no inflation, almost zero unemployment, and the man did that over a 5-year period. How did he do that? Well, he arrested God's chosen people, and he cut off the banks, and he cut off usury, and he started investing back in the German citizens, and the nation thrived. Just to recap that so far, America comes out of a war, the never-ending Iraq and Afghanistan war. We're fresh out of that. The economy is a little bit unstable. Then we started talking about inflation. Our currency last year under the Biden administration, a couple of years under the Biden administration, was at almost 10%. Everything was getting exponential. Remember, eggs were like $16 a dozen or $20 for a couple dozen. It was insane, right? And then how about our culture? What's our culture been like here in America? So Ian Malcolm 84, thread 3 says, culture. Amid the impoverished cities, cocaine, alcohol, and other vices became a coping mechanism for the poor people, while the select elites partied the nights away. While the masses lived in this dystopian hellscape, these elites enjoyed their utopia.
It's 2020, y'all. And it's different than when it was 2016. You know, the game has been elevated.
He knows better than be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television. Everything ain't for everybody.
You get 16. I'm good to go.
I'm good to go.
Are you good?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, young brother, everything's good? Selling out arenas and everything? Starting to act different, huh? You ain't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to hang out.
Well, I mean, you're...
For all those in London that don't know what happens to the white man when he comes to a P. Diddy party, this is what happens to the white man. When they come to one of my parties, I put them to sleep.
Where we hanging out and what we doing, we can't really disclose. But it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream.
Check this out.
Jewish statistician Alfred Marcus estimated the average Jewish income for 1930 as 3 times the average income for the rest of the population. The industries, as in the ruhr, were all bankrupt, and workers were all laid off in their millions.
Now let's talk about these staged rent-a-riot protests. How many of us feel like everything out there is paid and orchestrated? You're seeing the same paid protesters at the No Kings rally, at the Palestine protest, at the anti-ICE protest. You're seeing the same group of individuals. Like, how are they at all of these, right? Because they're paid agitators.
You know why? It's because we don't have a George Soros that's funding these operations. These people are being paid between $80,000 and $120,000 a year to be paid protesters. When you're a paid protester and you're a kind of wingnut, those two things go hand in hand. And yes, you'll fly to other cities and stay there and put your body at risk of fighting the federal government.
This is all part of the subversion that's taking place. And Ian Malcolm in thread 4 lays it out perfectly. He says deliberate subversion. He says, worst of all, this was an orchestrated effort. The elite leftists, the communists, aimed to destroy the social bedrock of society. It brought satisfaction to the elites to see these animalistic behaviors of the masses. Same thing we're watching right now, right? Check this out.
Every intellectual was leftish. The whole political right wing, which basically came from Munich, did not play any role in the beginning. The whole town was in the hands of leftish ideas.
Dr. Manfred Reifer, a well-known leader of the Jews of Bukovina, said, whilst large sections of the German nation were struggling for the preservation of their race, we Jews filled the streets of Germany with our vociferations. We supplied the press with articles.
Now let's talk about sexual degeneracy. Does anybody watching this video think that there is not some young lady on one of these platforms, whether it's OnlyFans or Patreon, that you can't pay to fulfill whatever sexual demonic desire that you have? Whether that's you want to get anal fisted, you want some chick to poop in your mouth, you want 2 girls, 1 cup, whatever demonic degenerate thing that you're into, you can pay somebody right now online to do it. All thanks to OnlyFans, Grindr, Patreon, Pornhub. All of these dark demonic websites have an unlimited amount of filth that's right at the fingertips, specifically of your children. And that's exactly what these sick fucks want. Ian Malcolm thread 5 says, how about sexual degeneracy? As more morality declined, views on sexual deviancy shifted. Inspired by media, propaganda, and brothels, society quickly developed into an anything goes mindset where nothing was off limits. It was called the Babylon of the 20s. Check this out.
The hyperinflation of Germany attracted the international community to Berlin, and it was known as the moral cesspit of Europe, where any and every deprived sexual activity could be had. The cultural Marxist Jews had introduced decadence and immorality into German culture, movies, art, and theater.
That's why people saw Berlin as the Babylon of the 20s.
Things that had been considered to be immoral, amoral, whatever, became irrelevant, and anything went.
Now let's talk about how they forced homosexuality on us. Did you know that back in the 1920s and early 30s, that Hoover was building a list, this is the director of the FBI, was using a blackmail list. So he built the Blue Oyster Club in New York. He would throw these gay ragers at parties with these transgender people and all these unlimited drugs.
And like we all, hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so. Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah.
And Hoover had wired every room. Because back in the day, you could blackmail somebody if they were gay. So if you had somebody, a politician, on camera doing some type of gay act, you could use it as blackmail because it would end their political career. So as time and civilization moved on, we had politicians that were gay and were being blackmailed. So they're highly incentivized to force this LGBTQ, this gay rights agenda down our throats, because once they normalize it, once they legalize it, well, then they can't be ostracized, they can't be blackmailed anymore. And that's how we've led to the pedophilia times, because the last piece of blackmail, something so demonic that'll end your career that you're literally willing to swallow a bullet before you come out and admit, is pedophilia. So that's why you see this big push to legalize pedophilia, to normalize this degenerate behavior with children. And that's exactly what we saw over in Nazi Germany. Nothing was off limits. So if we jump over here and we take a look at thread 7 from Ian, he says homosexuality. As the sexual norms changed, homosexuality and the propagandizing of the lifestyle exploded across the cities. Films, clubs, and culture pushed for it on all fronts. Sound familiar? You think Hollywood, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all these companies and corporations that are pushing this LGBTQ trans agenda on your children, do you think that's by accident? Check this out.
The first homosexual and transsexual propaganda theater plays were made in Berlin in the 1920s. The first adultery theater plays were made by Jewish authors.
Places that you hadn't noticed would turn into outrageous strip clubs. The basements of the restaurants would be homosexual or lesbian romper rooms and sex clubs.
And I truly, honestly believe in this saying, right? If my daughter grows up to work on a pole, I failed as a father. Or if my daughter grows up and she's doing OnlyFans for a living, I failed as a father. Now what would you say if your daughter and your wife were working that pole together for enough money to buy a loaf of bread? That was the type of moral degeneracy that God's chosen people drove the Germans to in the 1920s and 1930s. Thread 8 by Ian, he says, prostitution. In the decay and the culture decline, people turn to the oldest and most debasing of occupations just to scrape by. Men, women, and even children turned into prostitutes as brothels littered every major city. Parents were even hired alongside their own children as sex slaves. Check this out.
Prostitution was legalized in 1927. Mother and daughter teams offered their services to the same client simultaneously. There were no fewer than 17 different prostitute types in this brothel city.
There were clubs where lesbians liked to whip schoolboys, and you'd find military officers sitting there with children sitting on their laps.
And this is exactly what Gavin Newsom was doing in California. So I believe it was in 2022, Gavin Newsom made it illegal for the police officers to arrest women that were standing out in the corner in their G-string thongs, right? So they called this the Blade over in California. There's one part of the Blade where I turned down this like back road, this industrial complex, and there had to have been 50 to 100 prostitutes that were out there. I mean, every piece of sidewalk, you know, like the cuts in the sidewalk where they cut with a saw, they're like 4-foot sections. Every one of those 4-foot sections for literally 200, 300, 400 feet. I mean, an entire football field, girls everywhere, cops driving by. And then they were out there until 6 in the morning. At 6 in the morning, there were children trying to get on the school bus while you have prostitutes standing out on the corners. That's how degenerate California has and how our country is becoming morally bankrupt. When you have prostitutes working on a corner in front of a school bus and your law enforcement officers are being told it's illegal to arrest these women and get them off the streets, that is a bankrupt civilization. Your civilization is on the verge of collapse, and all the writing is on the walls.
When you have unemployed, you also have an increase in sex workers. But it wasn't just Berliners. It was tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of young boys and young girls who were coming to Berlin to participate in this hard currency sex traffic.
Does anybody feel like these people are preying on our children? Hell yeah, they are. Now, Ian Malcolm in thread 11 says, sex reform. As desperation withered the morals, social, and religious standards, the elites redefined accepted norms on gender and sex. Jews like Magnus Hirschfeld worked to chemically and physically alter the very fabric of humanity while pushing perverse ideologies. Check this out.
It's Magnus Hirschfeld, the first man to use the term transgender and a leading homosexual advocate of the 19th century, who argued homosexuality was an inborn and natural form of human sexuality that ought to be embraced. In 1919, he opened the Institute for Sexual Science, dedicated to campaigning for the spreading of pornography into schools and broadcasting homosexual propaganda films in Germany highlighting cross-dressing and drag culture. Hirschfeld also was the first operator of sex change operations, brutally mutilating mentally ill patients and adding their genitalia to his personal collection of penis-enclosed jars around the world. In 1921, Hirschfeld teamed up with the most prominent and successful rabbis in Germany, including mega-patron Karl Abraham, launching the World League of Sexual Reform. They held a systematic platform on brainwashing the upcoming generation of German youth through a masturbatory curriculum with the written goal of making young German boys cheap prostitutes as a sign of cultural and sexual triumph. But in 1933, National Socialists took power in Germany, and on May 6, 100 students stormed the Institute of Sexual Science and destroyed his monument to degeneracy, permanently closing the building and burning his grand library of pornography he planned to showcase to the German youth.
So were they forcing their transgender garbage down our throats? Absolutely. Now, how did they get away with this? The last